the big one right now that we're seeing on TikTok all over the place is Thailand and Cambodia. So become very popular. I get probably 2 to 3 inquiries a month from people because I book travel for people all over the US. So, it's super easy to get to from the West Coast, that type of thing. So a lot of people are really, that's a huge hotspot right now.
Hi there. Welcome to the Connecting KC podcast. I'm Rachel Kilmer, also known as Rach the Realtor on the internet, where I love, connecting all things KC. I'm a metro area real estate agent, retired sports reporter, and mom, and probably too old to call myself a TikToker, but honestly, that's how we got here. You can learn more at www.rachtherealtorkc.com. But this show is all about introducing you to all of the movers and shakers, interesting people, heartfelt stories, and funny quirks that make this vibrant community home. So let's get right to it with today's episode of Connecting KC. Welcome into today's episode of Connecting Kansas City, where I am excited to talk about something that I hold near and dear to my heart with a dear friend. This is Shelley Robison joining us today from Sun, Sand, Sea Travel. It was born out of Shelley's love for travel and having new experiences with other people and cultures. She can book any type of travel adventure you wish to go on. And she has specialties that do include relaxation in the Caribbean, but also independent travel adventures in Europe and Central America. Let Shelley at Sun, Sand, Sea Travel help you realize your vacation and adventure dreams. Shelley, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I have used Shelley to book a couple of trips for myself. One was my first big European excursion last year. I spent 2 weeks in Spain, and Shelley made it so easy. And I think especially people that are younger don't think of using a travel agent all the time when they're booking travel. What are the benefits of a travel agent? What exactly does a travel agent do?
Awesome question, because I do get this every day, daily. Didn't even think a travel agent was still a thing, etc. Basically, it's the research that if I could have another title besides travel advisor or travel agent, it would be /researcher. I have a lot of people, especially within your age range, that say, I just don't have the time. I want to go to something that I saw on Instagram, and, I just don't have the time to research it any longer because I have a family, my kids are younger, I'm busy working, etc. So researcher is probably the top key for what I do. And then taking all the guesswork out, flights being canceled, flights being rebooked, etc. We take care of all of that on top of all the reservations, transportation, just the ease of everything.
That was my experience for sure. Just someone that, again, young kid, busy job. I really wanted to go to Spain, but I knew that it was kind of beyond my scope. And so I was like, hey, Shelley, I want to go to these cities and I want to be there these dates, have at it. And then I basically just showed up and then everything was already planned, which was awesome. So what about people that are more hands-on? Does hiring a travel agent make sense for people that do want to do some of the research and some of the legwork? And how do you work with that type of personality?
Again, awesome question. Basically, what I tell people, if you are booking just a standard round trip ticket, let's say Kansas City, Las Vegas, I'm not needed. And I will rightfully turn down the business because I would have to charge you a fee to purchase an airline ticket because we don't get paid from the airlines any longer. It's just not feasible for anyone to use me for a standard airline ticket. A standard hotel, we're going on a car trip with the kids and we need a hotel overnight between Kansas City and Chicago. Here's use this website. Here it is. It's great. But I'm not going to probably book that for someone. So for somebody who likes to do research, usually I come into play with a big trip, like a once in a lifetime. I have a family going to Japan. We want to see the cherry blossoms, which is exactly, I just had a client take 7 people to Japan last month for the cherry blossom season. So she normally does a lot of her own travel, but that was a spot that she knew nothing about and just, reached out and said, hey, would you be able to help? Groups are a big thing. People love to do the research and say, hey, I have a group, but I want to take, we want to go on a cruise at Christmas time. So a lot of it is I get the idea from people. They do the initial research, but they don't know the ins and outs and the deep dive into a destination. Unfortunately, I can't know everything either, but that's my job, is to research it. I wish I could know everything, but a lot of, right now I'm researching Australia for somebody. They're adding on a land tour behind a cruise. So Australia, I have not been, unfortunately. It's on the bucket list for eventually someday, but she just doesn't have, the time, the brain power to, okay, I get off the ship on this day. I need to add on X amount of days on a land tour, so it just kind of comes all into play of what somebody is comfortable with and what somebody isn't comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Are you seeing a shift in the kinds of travel that people are booking? Because I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like 10 years ago, everyone was just doing all-inclusives in Mexico, and that still has its time and place for sure. But I feel like everyone now is like, I want to go adventure and see the world. And have you noticed that too? And what do you kind of attribute that change to?
Adventure travel has become huge, meaning, not the standard, like you said, all-inclusive vacation in Mexico, which, like you said, it definitely has a time and a place. My husband and I were just talking about, hey, we could really use 4 nights, and not have to think, because those vacations you don't have to think about. Once you've got it booked, it's easy and it's done. But the adventure travel, things that people haven't normally even thought about, Europe is huge. Europe's been huge for the last several years. Because it's actually cheaper to fly to Europe than it is from Kansas City to San Francisco or Kansas City to New York sometimes. So a lot of people are using that as just kind of a gateway to go and explore in things that they wouldn't even have thought of 5 years ago. COVID, nasty word that it is, had a lot to do with that. People were stuck in their homes. They were, looking on the internet, they were seeing Instagram, they were seeing all the places that they never would have thought about. And now they're like, okay, I could go do this. And it's economical in all senses that, hey, why not? So that's where a lot of it, cruising is still super popular. Came back full force after COVID. Everyone said, oh, it's going to take them forever. It did take them forever to come back, but they're stronger than they ever were, even before COVID. So, you used to be able to get a great deal on a cruise. You can still find them, but they are harder to come by. So land tours and land vacations have become a much more popular choice.
I definitely saw a TikTok about a place and booked a trip to that place off of the TikTok that I had never seen before. That was Holbox in Mexico. Have you been there?
Have not, but have read a lot about it. Very up and coming. Was never even a place on anybody's radar until about 2-3 years ago, where it became, super, super, super popular. The big one right now that we're seeing on TikTok all over the place is Thailand and Cambodia. So become very popular. I get probably 2 to 3 inquiries a month from people because I book travel for people all over the US. So, it's super easy to get to from the West Coast, that type of thing. So a lot of people are really, that's a huge hotspot right now.
How do you get connected with most of your clients?
Word of mouth. So just like in real estate with you, referrals are huge for us. So, 26 years in the business this year has, a lot of people have known my name or booked a trip with me in the past, that type of thing, or I'll get a phone call and say, hey, you booked a trip for my cousin, 2 years ago, that type of thing. So lots and lots of word of mouth. We do have some Facebook groups and Facebook pages that we push out. My husband's in the business with me. He concentrates on river cruising in Europe, which has become our absolute favorite thing right now, which you and I have talked about. So just different things like that have really pushed the business.
Yeah, for sure. So, and how long have you been doing this full time?
So full time, probably about 16 years, total 26. So my husband and I owned a real estate company for a while and I helped him. So I was just doing friends and family at that point. We sold that company right at COVID. And it didn't, as he says, the ink wasn't even dry on the paper. When I said, I'm going back to travel full time, it's my love, it's my passion. That's what I'm going to do. And he took some time to kind of decide what he was going to do. with some of his free time. And so he decided to jump in feet first with me, but he concentrates much more than I do. I kind of do a broad spectrum, but he really narrows down that niche of what he's kind of concentrating on. So that's been nice because we can bounce off of each other. We joke that I do not plan our own travel. He plans our travel. Because I say all the time, I plan for everybody else, which I find easy. I find it extremely hard and stressful to plan my own vacations. So I let him take over our personal travel.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I was going to ask you. It sounds like a very similar business to real estate, so it makes sense you have a background in that.
Yeah, it's identical.
Yeah. So how do travel agents get paid? Because when I have referred you to people in the past, that's one of the first questions they ask, and I'm like, I honestly don't know because I don't care because she makes my life easier, and like I'm not questioning it. But some people are more analytical. Do the resorts pay you guys? Like, how do you make a living doing this?
So, as I had said prior, airlines don't pay us. So most agents will charge a fee to issue an airline ticket. And with that comes some service of making sure that the, flight's on time, et cetera, communication, that type of thing. But anytime you book a package, a resort, a hotel, a car rental, those vendors pay us. The thing is, even if you don't use an agent, you're paying 99% of the time you pay the same price. So you're leaving money on the table. So the other advantage is we can usually get some really great discounted rates, extra amenities, that type of thing with certain vendors. Not all the time. When people come to me and say, I'm looking for a really good deal. Well, I don't sell deals. Let's be honest. I sell service. Excuse me. I sell service. And I look, we have 100+ vendors for one thing. Your trip to Spain, I looked at 4 to 5, 6, maybe 7 different vendors to make sure to compare apples to apples that we were getting you the best quote unquote deal that we could find. Now, did that necessarily mean maybe not the cheapest in dollars, but you got an extra amenity, you got an extra perk, you got, something along those lines. So everything that the actual consumer looks at, we can look at. So usually what I tell people is they'll say, well, I found something cheaper on my own. That's fantastic. Send it to me. Let me analyze it and make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, because a class of service on an airline can make all the difference in the world. It could be, a couple $100 difference. Basic economy on flights compared to regular economy. Basic economy 9 times out of 10 is always going to price cheaper, but by the time you pay for your bag and pay to have a seat, you might as well book that economy that maybe it's only $65 more initially, but by the time you've paid for your checked bag and your seat, you're now at $150. Whereas if you would have just originally booked the economy ticket, you could have saved yourself $50. So it's a lot of that we do to an educator. So education, researcher, I could have all kinds of hats, but it's easier just to say travel agent or travel advisor.
Makes sense. So you and I are both small town girls. We're from a smaller town out east of Kansas City. And I feel like when I was growing up, there wasn't a travel mindset necessarily. Like if you went to Florida once a year, that was awesome and a big deal. When and where did you get exposed to travel, and when did you fall in love with it?
So actually, first time I got on an airplane, I was 12 years old, went to Disney, ultimately with my mom. Didn't get back on an airplane until I was 18. After graduation, went down to Alabama to the beach and came home. I was one of the kids, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. School was not my thing. I didn't mind it. I just knew I wasn't great at it. I've always loved geography and history. That was my thing in school. That's what I loved. So I found an actual course. At the time, they actually had schools. Travel agent schools. I found a course over in Kansas that was 9 months long that taught you how to be a travel agent. I thought, why not? Let's try it. So tried it, had maybe, I think there were 12 of us in class, and I was probably the last one that had a job because everybody's like, well, what are you going to do? And I still didn't know. I actually applied to go work at a cruise line at the time. But I was also in a serious relationship with my first husband at the time, and I didn't want to leave him for 9 months at a time. So I'm like, So I actually ended up being a flight attendant, for a regional carrier that is now defunct for right at 2 years. I was 3 days shy of my 2-year mark. And then decided that's probably not the best thing to do as a newlywed. So went into an actual brick and mortar travel agency, started that, loved it. We ended up moving, my first husband and I moved to Rochester, Minnesota for his job. And I worked with the Mayo Clinic. So I got a job with the Mayo Clinic because they have their own travel department. So that was kind of my first intro to the real, business itself. Moved back here, worked for an agency in Independence, actually, and then went to work for another corporate agency. Corporate was not my ideal. It was very regimented and kind of boring, to say the least. Good job security, but boring. So went back to the leisure spectrum of it, which is where my love is of, I want to go on vacation, that type of thing. There are certain aspects of the vacation travel that aren't my thing. A lot of people call me and say, well, what about Disney? I'll send you to a Disney professional because Disney is very complicated. I can book it, but it is not my favorite thing to book. We used to have a joke when I worked in Independence that people that came in to book Disney, we said, okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks after you get back from Disney to book your vacation from your vacation because Disney is so intense. So there's lots of aspects, Disney's not my thing. But I do know a lot of agents that is solely what they concentrate on and they do it fabulously. And I'm not going to compete with that. I prefer to book the Caribbean. I prefer to book Europe. I prefer to book small ship cruising, just because that's what I've experienced and what I love. So I can pass that passion on.
I feel like travel has become such a priority for people as well. My daughter is just turned 4 and I was just in my head counting. I think she's flown like 8 or 9 times and she's 4. And like a lot of us have the story where, we remember our first flight. And now it's like, it seems like a lot of children are flying before they can speak words. Where do you see this becoming more and more of a priority for people? And especially like with financial, the economy the way it is right now, people are struggling, but they're still prioritizing travel. Like, do you see that continuing to be a thing and growing more, or kind of what do you see for the future of travel?
I do see it becoming and still being a high priority for families. I think we're all kind of in the mindset our kids have everything that they quote unquote need. So let's give them an experience. Let's give them something that they can talk about in 10 years. Let's give them something that we can talk about as a family in 20 years. Our kids used to ask us all the time as they became older, but even in their teenage years, we have 3 grown children. So even in their teenage years, they would be like, let's go somewhere. And at the time we were like, really? But then we got to thinking about it. It's like, you have every sweater that you need for Christmas. You have every, electronic that you would need. And one of the family trips that we talk about to this day is we rented an RV and took off to Colorado for a week in the summer. And we have stories about that we still talk about and laugh at to this day because we watched the movie RV with Robin Williams before we went. And there were so many moments that were parallel to that movie that we still talk about to this day. They actually talk about that trip more than they talk about, we took them to Mexico to an all-inclusive one year for Christmas. They actually talk about the RV trip more than they talk about the Mexico trip. They'll talk about the Mexico trip, but there's more stories with the RV trip. So it's all about the memories. It's all about the connection. Lots of multi-generational travel happening where grandparents will take grandchildren, etc., just to create those memories of knowing how life changes so quickly and they just want to have that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Okay, I have like 4 questions left for you. 2 I ask everyone, 2 are travel specific. So travel specific first. What are the most underrated, slept on trips that people need to consider when they're thinking about traveling?
The first and foremost, I'm going to say, because you and I have talked about it, is river cruising in Europe. Most people think it is set for older people. Not necessarily. They do. Some of them, yes, I will agree. It depends. Just like anything else, you have to pick the right line. But there is a bunch of lines that do active and discovery. So very active. Like the last trip my husband and I went on, he went wine tasting in a cave. So, just different things like that most people don't think about. The other spot I would probably pick would be Asia, just because I have not personally been, but Asia is so up and coming and so popular right now and getting much easier to get to.
Mm-hmm. And super affordable too. My friend that went to Thailand was like telling me about the $15 massage she got, and like all
yes.
Like, oh my
and a full meal for what we can like $2 US for a full dinner. So lots of places to stretch your money, stretch your dollar. So yeah.
And then what are your personal top bucket list destinations that you haven't made it to yet?
Thailand is top of the list. Probably in the next 2 years, we'll have that mapped out to go. I also want to do Northern Europe. So Finland, Sweden, Norway is very high on my list. My husband says it's too cold. So we'll see who wins out on that. And the other one that will wait a couple years, but it's definitely there, is an African safari.
I love that. That's one of my top ones too. I want to take my daughter when she's like 10-ish, so she'll like really appreciate it, remember it. But I want to do that so bad.
It's not cheap. I'm not going to lie about that.
I'm saving now.
Yeah, it's not a cheap one, but it is definitely high on my list.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Okay, last two questions I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. First is, what is a great meal that you've had out and about in the Kansas City area recently?
We just moved back not too long ago, but before we moved out, we went to a fair and had dinner at a fair and loved that restaurant. The other day, where would it go? Was it, I think it's Noki, Noke, that we went for my husband's birthday, and it was fantastic. Kind of a Japanese fusion, fantastic place.
Yum. I always wanted to go to both of those, so I need to put them higher on my list. Okay, last question is, if people have questions about travel, they maybe want to book something, they want to pick your brain on a trip, what's the best way for them to find you online or get a hold of you?
So we do have a Facebook page, also a webpage, just Sun, Sand, Sea Travel. It's all ran together. And there's an inquiry page on there that they can fill out and it gets sent to us, etc. They can also set an appointment on that page to chat if they want to have a conversation that way. My direct phone number is fine also. The big thing is I also have people email me, but my last name, a lot of people put that middle in the last name and there's no middle in there. So sometimes I don't get those because it's floating in la la land. But direct phone number, 816-835-3046 is my direct phone number. Always happy to answer a text or a phone call there. But the webpage is probably the easiest.
sunsandseatravel.com. Love it.
Yes, all ran together.
Okay, perfect. Well, Shelley, thank you for your patience with me when I'm booking my trips and going 10 million different directions. And thank you for taking the time to come on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yep. Guys, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.